All right, so we're going to be continuing with that exercise, only this time we're going to do a scale of 5, and it's going to be all done with tones. Tones is when you take black and white, and then you add a little bit of color to the gray. So you're going to be using black, white, plus the color of your choice. Now you have in your palette red, blue, yellow. You could choose one of the 3 primaries, or you can choose to mix a secondary color. So the ribbon I'm going to be painting is purple, so I'm going to practice with the purple here. So in order to get purple, I have to mix 2 of the primaries together. In this case, it's red and blue, and that'll get me a purple. And it's pretty much 50-50 red to blue ratio. So I'm going to start out by taking my white and adding a drop of purple into it. And then I'm going to mix the shades of gray because I'm only going to do 5, even though I know you guys are capable and probably should do a scale of 10. So I'm going to start off with the grays. And I went a little bit too heavy-handed on the black, which can happen. It's easy to have that occur, in which case I need to adjust. This will probably happen to you too. So if that's the case, then I need to add something to it to get it to shift. And I can also scoot paint around. So I'm going to take a moment to mess with my values until I have them perfectly exactly where I want them. So I've actually washed my light brush before I went to use it here, just because I didn't want it to have pigment in it. So I want to make sure it was clean. And I'm going to go ahead and start painting number 1. Now number 1 is pure white, but it does have a little bit of purple, giving it a specific hue. So it should look like a pale pinkish purple color. Again, trying not to have too much paint on that brush and smoothing it around if it feels like there's too much in one specific area. You want the surface to be even, so it shouldn't have like blobs of paint in one portion. You want it to be even and relatively smooth. If you go outside of the box, it's not a big deal. I'm concerned here with value. So I'm looking more for that, and I'm also looking for a little bit of flavoring with your tone. So every one of these looks gray-ish, but it also has kind of a purple hue to it as well. And again, you can do this with red or yellow or blue, or you can mix an orange, or you can mix like a green color to put. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to the actual ribbon drawing. You're going to select one of the ribbon photographs, and you're drawing this about the same size as the photograph, maybe a little bit larger, but definitely not smaller than the photo reference. And you're only drawing the ribbon, and you're drawing the shadow that's on the ground plane. And you want to look for any twists. You can also draw the very bright shines, the highlights that are on the ribbon. So take a moment. Make sure that you draw lightly, because sometimes you can see the pencil marks through the paint and you don't want to end up seeing that. So draw light and try and get the right angles, and to the best of your ability, try to document the ribbon onto your paper. Before moving into painting on the ribbon, you need to first of all mix up some of your values. So I started with a scale, just like the one we did yesterday. So ranging from pure white to pure black, and 8 different shades of gray in between. And then I added the tone to it, and in this case it's purple. So to each of those black and white, gray values, I added a little bit of purple. You can actually kind of see it here up on the screen. Once you have that, then you can move into painting the ribbon. So it is really important that you pre-mix. Next step is to start to apply paint. Now you should all be working on a easel and on a board, and you should have your paper clipped to a board. And you're looking at your reference photo, which should also be clipped to the board as well. And you are going to be working from the darker values into the midtones, into the lights. So it's going to look patchy at first. You want to look for the darkest values. And by the way, on my palette, a lot of the paint has dried up since I did that tint tone value scale. So I have to make new paint, and I also have to make sure that I have a range of paint. So when I say range, I'm thinking about 10 values. 1 being like the very palest version of that color, and 10 being the very darkest version, and a whole bunch in between. And then you want to tease out those darker values in that painting. And again, remind yourself too that you're painting using short strokes, so not using long strokes. They should be about an inch or less. And how you hold that brush is important. So if you twist it sideways, sometimes you can get into tighter areas if you need to. So pay attention to the curve of the ribbon. If there's a knot, then you'll get even more of a curve or a bunched up area. If there's a loop, there'll be like this arching like curve there that you'd want to mimic with your paint stroke. So if you have a ribbon that's straight or at an angle, your paint stroke needs to kind of replicate that to suggest that it is a ribbon and it's curving or angled or folding in on itself. Again, keeping your strokes short. These are little strokes, and holding your brush farther back than you think. When I'm looking at my reference photo, I am squinting my eyes to kind of pick out the values, because I have kind of a map in the back of my mind about which values. The darkest one, what's the next darkest, what's the next after that. It's kind of like paint by numbers, and you need to start to break things down in those terms according to dark and light. You save the lights for the very end, so it should look kind of patchy at first, and then it'll come together slowly as the painting evolves. So the rules are this: you always want to do short strokes, particularly if you're trying to switch from one value to another value and get a smooth gradient. You also work in layers, so we're going to do one layer on the ribbon today and hopefully get one whole coat on there, and then the following class period we'll get a second coat. Now it may take more than one class period. It took me like an hour to do mine, so it might take you about that same amount of time or more. And you also want to work from dark into lights, so that means dark to midtones to light to highlights. And you want to get about 10 values. That's why it was so important to pre-mix some of our values. It actually saves you time if you make enough paint. What you don't want is your paint to obviously dry up before you can use it, but you do want to be able to have it set out, so all you have to do is focus on the painting part and not on the mixing part. By the way, you never want to mix with your brush, because that means that the paint will get stuck in the brush hairs and all the way up into the ferrule, which is the metal part of your brush where the brush hair meets the metal. And I'm working from the darker values into the midtones, and it does look kind of like a calico cat at first. And then you start to lighten up certain areas. The temptation is to do one little spot at a time, and in painting, that doesn't work out as well. I want you to try this method, give it a go, because this is how acrylic artists work, and it's how oil painters work as well. And if you end up taking an Art 2 class, or sometime down the line, if you take a college art class, they'll teach you the same thing. Everything you've learned about value, gradients, about getting an edge to be either soft or hard, that all applies to this painting as well. So make sure that you take your time, you squint your eyes to see the values, you use the short strokes, and you try and find gradients within the work, because you really should be emulating that ribbon and those places where it shines, and expect to put a second coat on this at a future class. So we'll do that either Wednesday or Thursday. Now Wednesday is a whichever day, so if you need to get caught up on the pastel, then you could go ahead and do that. But if not, continue with that ribbon painting.